Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to review two books rather belatedly because I ordered both of them last year to be delivered to my mother's house in Wimbledon in the UK, and I've only just managed to get over to the UK last month because of COVID. So I'm going to review 1, 2, 3, 4 from Craig Brown on the Beatles and Wings Live in the 70s from Adrian Allan. So we'll start off with Craig Brown's book, shall we? Both impressive, highly recommend both of these books. Craig Brown, a long-time contributor to Private Eye, doing parodies, and also took over Oberon War's column in the Telegraph, Way of the World, which I was a big fan of back in the day. He's recently done a fairly straight biography of Princess Margaret. He's essentially a satirist. He was born in '57. First exposure to the Beatles was listening to Pepper age 10 and then the White Album age 11. And in contrast to the more forensic, serious books from the likes of Mark Lewison and Ian MacDonald's, this book is written with a lot of humour, and those are the books that I tend to favour the most out of all the Beatles books written. If you've watched my channel, you know I'm a big fan of Beatles Illustrated Record by Karen Tyler, Beatles Forever by Nicholas Schaffner, and this book I would put in that bracket, no less, because it is wonderfully written with wonderful humour, and anyone who's watched The Ruttles knows that a lot of the Beatles story is inherently funny, and it just takes the right writer to discover that humour. And throughout the book, he's writing hilariously. It starts off the book with him in Fourth Lynn Road in Liverpool at Paul's old house being showed round on the official Liverpool tour, and he's sneaking his mobile phone. They're not supposed to be allowed, but he's sneakily taking pictures and recording what she's saying. And I think the tour guide spots him, and he almost gets into trouble. We've got hilarious interviews with people who attended Ed Sullivan. It's well researched, Craig Brown. He's obviously read a lot of the Beatles books or researched a lot of the interviews of people involved in the Beatles story, including Albert Goldman. So he's trying to be objective, and more often than not, he doesn't draw a conclusion. He just says there's divergence of opinion as to what happened, and make your own mind up, which is what we do. But very heartwarming stories of fans being told to turn up to Victoria bus station the following day, and they do, to meet the Beatles, they're told, and they can't quite believe it, and they turn up the next day and they get put on a bus, and they're all taken down to Twickenham, and they attend a Hey Jude promo shoot as part of the crowd at the end of Hey Jude, and it's just wonderful stories like that. And then there's a girl who works in an office in Savile Row. She hears music coming out the window. She realises it's coming from the roof. She doesn't quite know what it is. She goes onto the roof of her own building, crosses across a few other roofs, I think legs it down a drain pipe, and then before you know it, she's within 15 feet of the Beatles and for the famous Rooftop concert, January the 30th, 69. On a sadder note, we've got an interview with the off-duty cop who ran over Julia Lennon, John's mother, and for years and years he didn't tell anyone about it, just kept the guilt to himself, although he says he wasn't speeding, and I don't think he admits he was drunk either. So, and I think he got away with it in the court. So anyway, he later became a postman, and he was delivering all this fan mail to Paul's house in Fourth Lynn Road, and no one knew that this was the same guy who'd run over Julia, so very sad. What else have we got? Hilarious story of Paul and Derek Taylor coming back from the north of England, coming back to London and stopping off in a village called Harold for no apparent reason other than just to go for a walk by the river. And Paul, walking down the road, asks this guy who was, I think, cutting his hedge or something, what's the way to the river? And he's directed to the river, and then the guy, Gordon Mitchell goes into his house, tells his wife Pat that Paul McCartney's just asked the directions to the river. So they go down to the river together, and they find Paul and Derek Taylor in a pub, and they all have a few drinks, and then Pat says come back to the house for some food. They do that, and then the landlord of the pub comes to the door saying it's closing time, but we're reopening the pub. And so they all go back to the pub, and Paul plays the piano until 3 a.m. It's just one of those stories where just amazing. And Gordon and Pat Mitchell a couple of days later get sent a thank you note and 2 bottles of champagne for the school raffle for the following Saturday. So just heartwarming story, and other hilarious references to the Apple launch, which was also covered so well in the Ruttles. Obviously, the Hells Angels taking over the Christmas party, demanding the turkey before it was ready at the Apple Christmas party, where John and Yoko turned up as Father and Mother Christmas, and one of the onlookers said, "I've never seen a more miserable Father Christmas," talking about John Lennon, but he did manage to say "ho, ho, ho" a couple of times to the kids. So we got lovely interviews with Noel Coward, who says how much he despises the Beatles, Kenneth Williams, similar. So he's covering the people who don't like them, as well as it's obvious that Craig Brown is a fan. And then there's little stories of, people like the Goons, who were very big, the Beatles were big fans of the Goons growing up, and there's a story in this book about how the Goons were playing at Coventry, and Spike Milligan was so annoyed with the audience for not laughing at the jokes. He shouted, "I hope you get bombed again," and stormed off stage, went to his dressing room, and when the other Goons found him, he was had a noose around his neck, standing on a chair looking to attach the other end of the rope to a beam. So that was a pretty disturbing story. The whole book is just picking, the interesting, what I would say the interesting, or in many cases the humorous bits of the Beatles story, and just making it imminently readable. It's in very short chapters, 3 or 4 or 5 pages max, so you can dip in and dip out of it if that's what you want to do. But I found myself, when I picked it up, it was very hard to put down, and I finished it pretty quickly, and I would just highly recommend this book. And now we're going to talk about this Wings book, which covers Wings live in the 70s, all the way from the 72 university tour to the tour of Europe in 72, the tour of Europe in 73, and then the Australia and UK tour of 75, and the US tour of 76, and then the final Wings tour of 79. And Adrian's managed to interview a lot of people who were there at the concerts, who talk about their experience, and he analyses whether, for example, Wings Over America was heavily overdubbed for the album, as people have claimed. Joe English said, "Paul and I had to hold the sound of that band together because the backing vocals were terrible and we had to overdub everything for the live album." But Adrian's done a fair amount of research listening to the tapes of the live shows and comparing it to the album, and concludes that there was not an excessive amount of overdubbing. Interesting interview with Lawrence Juba at the end here. If you remember, the last book of his had an interview with Jeff Britton, so he's managed to get quite a coup in getting Lawrence there, and covers the 79 tour in fantastic detail, and the build up to the Japan tour, which was sadly cancelled because of the pot bust. But and also covering some of the lesser known concerts, like in 76, after they did America, they came back to Europe and did a concert in Venice, Vienna, Zagreb in Yugoslavia, which was apparently an absolute triumph, and Munich, and then obviously I think it was 3 dates at Wembley. Chris Welch wrote an unflattering review of that Wembley concert, which is in the book, and Paul remembered it and didn't forgive him for years. And I think I'm right in saying Chris Welch turned up on the boat for the London Town Press launch, and Paul said, "Oh, you're the guy who gave us the bad review," and he says to Denny, "This is the guy who gave us the bad review." So Paul didn't really forgive him, I don't think, or maybe he was kidding around, but it wasn't a particularly nice review. But Chris Welch said it wasn't meant vindictively, he was just trying to be honest. But yeah, so I recommend both of these books. They're both valuable additions to the catalogue. We've had a lot of Beatles books out there over the years, but these ones are both good ones and highly recommended. Sorry for the tardiness of my reviews. So thanks for watching. See you next time.